No.
Well, look at that. We are going live, everybody. That's just
Hello.
the way to go here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ohayou
Welcome, Rise
gozaimasu.
Up family. Here's where we talk about responsibility, integrity, service, empathy, and action, and learn what's going on in the world and the difference that I can make. We're here with Naria Gorder, our National Program Coordinator. Hello. Ricky, our UN correspondent. Ricky, hello. We've got a great show for you today. We have an article on transportation and UN's stance on things these days, and a very moving article that might bring a tear to your eye. And I'll give a thought provoking talk on motivation at the end, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so let's go to our first article talking
Yes.
about, well, the title of this article on the UN site says, with clock ticking, sustainable transport key to global goals. Ricky.
Hi. Thank you, Miilhan. And yeah, it's as you said. For today's article, I want to talk about, this new focus from the UN side on sustainable transportation. So, if you guys didn't know, there's a global sustainable transport conference kicking off in just a few days. And to prepare for this conference, there's been a lot of conversation around. Well, first of all, since we're in the executive action, uh, what is it that we can do that can put us on the fast track uh, to achieving these sustainable goals, but also how we can communicate and work together to um, have a bigger, more impactful progress with these goals. So, as I was sharing, the conference on sustainable transport is coming up, and one of the big question is, what are we doing to create more sustainable transportation, but also a more available transportation. Uh, that also, but also looking at what does sustainable transportation do for the climate and for ecosystems, environment, and so yeah, basically the article is sharing that actually one of the more important things that we can do as a society, especially here in the Western world, is actually take a look at our transportation, because a lot of the CO2 emissions, well, obviously there's a lot of different reasons that we're getting a lot of CO2 emissions, but a big part of the CO2 emissions is the CO2 emissions coming from vehicles. And so actually, I was looking at a statistic, and it said about like 90% of Americans either have a vehicle and are driving, or have a license and are looking to drive in the near future. And so there's nothing wrong with driving, having a car, uh, but in a lot of cases, this is not so much due to a desire or a need for the vehicle, but rather there's no alternative. So if you're looking at areas like uh, Midwest and a lot of areas in the South, where it's a lot of farmland, you need vehicles to get around, essentially. And so what we have to look at is what can we do to reduce that number of cars that are on the street, uh, but in a way that also provides alternatives, cheaper alternatives for those who want to reduce the amounts of cars and CO2 emissions and all that. So, yeah, I think I can't speak to other countries and what they're doing, But at least from my perspective, being an American, growing up in America, I feel like there's a lot more we can do to provide cheaper, more accessible transportation, especially in cities, but also in like rural areas. And yeah, look to decrease the number of cars on the road and decrease the CO2 emissions. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, thanks, Ricky. I'm reading this article and they talked about the impacts of COVID. They see it as mostly setbacks in terms of maybe progress in terms of having these conferences and eradicating poverty. But they do say that it does give us a chance to rethink the necessity of travel. And I certainly have experienced that firsthand. I don't need to go to New York anymore for work. At the same time, I do find myself going there more these days because it is much nicer to work in person with your compadres. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Just, I know that telecommuting is just a small fraction of what we're talking about here. I still own a car, of course, and I still use it quite often. But yeah, is there maybe about COVID? What opportunity do we have now to rethink transportation? Has any expert talked about that and the opportunity we have there?
Yeah, I like that point. I think I missed that in the article. I might have glossed over it. But yeah, I do think, COVID, although it came with its challenges, it's like you said, it allows us to look at things like transportation in a different way. Like, do we need to come into the office? Sometimes there's a lot of work that we're doing that requires transportation that maybe, could be done at home. So I think, that's one thing. Besides that, I don't know if COVID really has
impact
in that sense.
Was there any like noticeable reduction in emissions over the past year?
I don't think so. If there was, it's very small.
Yeah, maybe for like a short period of time, it was very maybe there was like a reduction for a few months, but then that's about it. The traffic is just as bad as it was, as I remember.
Yeah. People are still driving for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, for me, transportation is a sector of our economy. And
yeah, actually, sorry to cut you off. Actually, we did go down by 6.4%. I don't know how much that was because of COVID, but that's interesting.
Right. Because so far it's like year over year we're increasing. That seemed to be the trend. So to go down implies that something dramatically changed, but temporarily, perhaps. Yeah. Well, again, I see transportation as like a part of our economy, and so last week we talked about the businesses maybe cooperating more with the UN. So the transportation. I mean, of course, there's some civil, civic development there. It's not which is more of the political realm, but ultimately we're talking about which nation is going to experiment with their economy. It's like it's not a simple thing to test, to try out. At the beginning of that article you talked about, I mean, we could pull up the image, but there's a picture of a guy from, it looks like a bus driver from what is it? Where is he from? From Chile. And it's going to take him 2.5 hours to recharge his bus, because it's an EV. So it's like, this is a sacrifice. So so my question is, well, what's going to be first? I asked this question before we started today, which was, are we going to have world peace first? Or are we going to have effective global systemic climate action? And see, there he is. Poor guy. I mean, at the same time, it's like, well, maybe we all should be waiting 2.5 hours to charge our cars, and maybe think twice before we drive it around all the way everywhere. I don't know. It's a question. Naria?
Well, on this topic, I have a lot of different ideas and thoughts, I guess. But to make a comment on the bus charging time, I think with our technology, the way we're advancing, we're always finding new and more efficient ways to be able to advance our technology. Like our computers, our phones are getting smaller and smaller. Well, the phones seem to be getting bigger because they're now new computers, but
Yeah. I think it's getting bigger, Naria.
yeah, but just the fact, like our first telephone was this basically a case that you had in a bag that you carried around and had a receiver and everything. So our first like cell phone, I guess you'd call it. So we've come a long ways in that aspect. So I think with even transportation and electric cars and vehicles taking a long time to charge, I'm sure at some point it's going to start getting improved so that it doesn't take as long, or finding a new technique that's much better. But yeah, when you think about like carbon footprint, it does, the first thing does come to mind is with transportation and the exhaust from vehicles. And I did hear that, yeah, there was a reduction in carbon emissions with COVID happening. And if you went out driving, you noticed that there's like almost nobody on the highways and stuff. But then again, with people being stuck at home, there were a lot more deliveries going on with food and necessities. So I'm wondering if the impact was beneficial or not that different, I guess, with vehicles driving around, because if a lot more Amazon trucks and delivery trucks were driving around to deliver things because people were stuck at home and couldn't do it themselves, it feels like it's almost kind of equal in that way. Those are just my thoughts. I'd have to look into it to actually find out what the facts are. But yeah,
I think with their logistics, it was probably a little more efficient because they would consolidate similar locations as opposed to going to and fro.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So yeah, with transportation in the country, I thought of Korea and Japan. So I visited there, and they have a very well developed public transportation. So like Ricky said, it depends on where you live. If you're in the countryside, middle of nowhere, you kind of need a car because there isn't really public transportation available. But in kind of more city urban areas, like fast trains or bus systems and subway systems, those are available to you and you can use them. So I think it really, again, it depends on finding the right formula, I guess, like what's needed in a certain area, instead of just deciding black and white. We need to just do this for this and that for that. But each place needs its own kind of like custom consideration of what it needs for transportation, but also thinking about how it impacts the environment. Like already in America and around the world, we've paved roads everywhere. There's nowhere where there's no like road kind of thing. And when you think about the impact, you're taking down trees, you're blowing up parts of mountains to create roads and stuff like that as well. So anyway, I can go on and on. Those are the thoughts that come to mind when it comes to the environment. But that's a necessity. We need to be able to get around, and we can't like just fly across it. Not everyone has the ability to pay for an airplane or own their own plane to go across it. Obstacles on the land, but then it also has an impact with emissions and birds and whatever else when you're flying. So it's just thinking about all those different factors and what's needed, because we can't be completely like unimpactful to the environment, but we have to I guess consider what is the best course where we can be the least impactful and what's beneficial for the environment. I mean, we don't want to go back to the horse and buggy days because it's not, I guess it doesn't work for our economy and for the benefit of people. I mean, for some areas, and if you live in the country, maybe that's all you need and you're satisfied, and that's you can operate and live happily that way. But in other places, it doesn't work well. You can't have a bunch of horse and buggies in New York City.
The horses, I mean, I'm sure they release methane, and you got to feed them, and
yep, and it's an expense. Yeah. But when you think, you feed a car fuel or electricity, and they let out emissions, except electric cars. I guess I'd look more into that, but
I'm sure horse have emissions of some kind of point. But I
was just thinking, imagine living like the Amish. Everybody just lives like the Amish.
Yeah, and those roads are very if I remember. But yeah, that's a good point. I'm like, let's just no more roads, no more dams. We just take everything we made, we just undo, and then just live like cavemen. And maybe we can maybe experiment with that. Just try that in some places. But yeah, thanks, Naria. I don't know. I just to answer my own question about, I really do believe that peace and harmony needs to come first, because I'm not saying they're going to work in tandem, of course, but I just can't imagine the world cooperating, because of course climate change will just progress and get worse and worse, but it's still it's still too gradual, and so people are going to just settle and adapt. But if you had world peace, where it's like, what, I think we need to, people will put their conscience above, capital profit, So I think that's going to happen first. Imagine, also like the New York, for example, New York public transportation is kind of old, and it's always trying to fix it here and there. But then you go, like you mentioned Korea, and they're relatively new. So imagine like building new technologies in other parts of the world. If we start to think more like global citizens and start to support like Africa or South America or Central America, just building new infrastructure there and, make it more inhabitable. It's just, I don't know. I'm just thinking that would be cool. It'd be great. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to our feel-good article. First of its kind commencement inside prison. Celebrates 25 inmates that earned bachelor's degrees behind bars. Naria with the story.
All right. Yeah, so this is a really inspiring story, and I actually want to read a quote from the article from one of the inmates that graduated. So, and I think this really kind of not just resonates to prison inmates, but for anyone really, about like kind of how the world views an individual based on kind of what they do or did, and they're labeled because of that. So this is something. So here's the quote. Today, an education to me means freedom, redemption, and opportunity, graduate Dara Yin said during his student address at the ceremony. The freedom to create better lives, a redeeming quality in the sense that we can step out of an identity that was destructive and into the person our mothers always meant for us to be. The opportunity to show that we are not our worst decisions, that we crave to be a part of the larger society so that we can put to use our unique combination of lived experience and education. This was a project actually created in 2016 with the Cal State LA's campus university to teach inmates in person. Actually, it's an in-person education program, and 25 incarcerated men received bachelor's degree, and they graduated this past October 5th in the 70 miles prison yard. So another fact is that this project that started in 2016 was supported by President Barack Obama's Second Chance Pell Federal Pilot Program, and it's also supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And then through this program, students earn their Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and there's a focus on organizational communication. And so they got to wear their gowns, their caps, and be able to graduate. And there's also testimonies from like the teachers how proud they are for these men to be able to get these degrees and be able to graduate while being incarcerated. And going back to that quote from one of the graduates, the fact that they get to become something that they'd always, their mothers wanted them to be, they also wanted to be, and be able to contribute back to society. I think that's really important and powerful to think about, because oftentimes when we think about prison inmates, you think like, oh, they did something terrible, they're always going to be like that. And they're just going to be stuck in prison. But everyone wants to be able to give something back to society, do something for the community, do something for the world, even in a minute like scale. But they want to be we want to be of value. We want to be able to do something. So that's why I feel this is really powerful, and I really love hearing that that testimony, that quote, because yeah, we sometimes do that too. We've done things in the past that we're not proud of, and sometimes other people have seen that and don't have the best impression of us, and so they kind of label us, or we even label other people, oh, this person's like that because they do this. But people grow, people change, and we want to ultimately become better. I hope, most of us. So we don't want to. I hope that through this article we can think about how we want others to give us a chance, I guess, to see that we are better than what we were before, and that we can also give others that chance as well.
Yes, this is such a heartwarming and hopeful article, and yeah, thanks, Naria. For me, this speaks to the unique quality of each person, and that I say there's a basic right for every human that walks this earth or is born into this world, a good education. I think the education allows them to develop their mind and their heart for, to contribute to society, be connected to our human family. And I can probably tell you right now that they did not have that education. They didn't have that chance, that right. And why, and that's, most likely the reason why they ended up where they ended up. And so I hope we can inspire more of things like this. I'm reminded, I had a chance to hear from our borough president of Brooklyn, Eric Adams. He gave a talk recently I attended. He talked about how he himself was a straight D student, through his whole schooling time. And he didn't think much of himself, and no one else did either, until I think he was getting some counseling, and they discovered that he had dyslexia. And from that point, he was able to kind of redirect or kind of reconfigure his learning approach, and was able to excel incredibly, and was made the dean's list in his college, and as of course now he's very accomplished, having served in the police force, I think in moving up the ranks and becoming borough president, and now a candidate for mayor. It's that's what an education can do. That's what a little bit of attention to an individual can do. And so when I see this, I'm just really hopeful, and I hope that we can understand the motivation behind, the Cal State, faculty to do this, and so we can spread this culture across the country. So yeah, that's it. Ricky?
Yeah, I think it's always really awesome to see projects like that. I think unfortunately our prison system wasn't designed to reintegrate prisoners back into society. I think it's more designed to, I don't know, stick
Punish.
people in somewhere for justice, some sense of justice, I suppose. But yeah, seeing stuff like that, it gives me some hope that there's a possibility that prison system can be reformed in some way, because yeah, as it stands right now, it's just really difficult for a lot of people leaving prison to even change their lives, even if they wanted to. It's so hard to get a job after, and the life they had before that just seems so much easier. Yeah, it's always good to see.
That's an interesting point you're making about how prisons are designed and what their mission is, if they have a mission. But is it to be punitive? Is it to punish and make it so that nobody wants to go to prison? Maybe that's the point. Treat them as poor as you can. That way nobody wants to go there, right? That's one idea about it. But for my kid, when I put him in timeout, I don't, my heart isn't to necessarily make him feel as horrible as possible. I put him in timeout because he needs to separate from his sister, because otherwise someone's gonna kill each other. So I put him in timeout, but I'm literally like, you need a timeout. You need to just sit there. You need to just relax. Just let off some steam. You can scream. You can do whatever you want in there. Just you're not ready to enter the living room. If that makes sense. But I only need to wait like a minute or two, and he's already let it out. I go back in there and I just give him a hug, and he comes back in, and like I feel like that's all people need is, of course, sometimes people have a lot of psycho therapy that needs to happen, but I think often they just need a timeout. But the heart is, like you said, you have to reintegrate into society. So I know it's a lot of work, and I haven't done a whole lot about it. I have a friend of mine who's a dentist in a prison. Maybe I can ask him how that's been. But yeah, maybe we should do more there. I know with Tonga Mudo, one of our signature martial arts programs, I know we're very successful doing work like that in reintegration in the Philippines mostly. But hey, interesting. Yeah, good thought. Thanks, Naria, for the article. All right, let's go into my final little tip here. And I want to talk about motivation, because I know there's like 100,000 million approaches to motivation, but I think there's one universal motivator. And I think it's the truest one, because you cannot escape, right? What are the two things that you cannot escape, right? They always say taxes and
Death.
Death. Thank you. So recently I've been, a few elders in my life have passed away. One of which I got to know over the past couple of years, and I really admired her dedication to her mission. And it really transformed me attending her funeral. I was able to kind of reflect on, am I really living up to my own standards, my own principles, my own values, and the things I want to accomplish in my life? And I have not. I've been far from it, in fact. And so just seeing her, and she no one even knew the real condition she was in, because she was working so hard. And it just made me think, wow, how like the gap was just so far that I was feeling. I snapped out of it, honestly. The next day I was already just kind of dropping some of my more addictive habits, and started taking more responsibility and noticing how many people really depend on me, and paying attention to them. So my point about motivation is simply to think about your death. Some people see death as like a scary thing that's they don't want to think about. But I think you're doing yourself a disfavor by doing that. I think you should get excited about it, thinking, wow, I'm 1 second closer to my death. So that's it's exciting to think, wow, this life is you become more grateful. Like, wow, I actually do have control over a lot of the things I want to do. And you're going to have your ups and downs, and certainly you don't want to be just like a maniac every day. You do want to have those peaceful, quiet moments as well. Pick up a book, or play with your kids or whatever. Or even play a video game here and there. But just know that this is your life, and it's not forever. So, make the best of it. And, you might be surprised. You think, oh my God, if I think about death, I'm going to be super busy and trying to do everything, saying yes to everything. But I don't think so. I think it's just kind of an awakening of what really matters. And you'll find yourself being more effective and doing more meaningful things. So motivation. Yeah, the universal motivator. just pondering your imminent death. So thank you. Sorry for the morbid. It could be morbid, but I don't know. I think there's a gentle optimism as well.
Speaking of morbid, looks like I have a black cat behind me. She's actually gray. Just the lighting makes her black.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Let's say the black cat crossed you a few times.
Yeah.
It seemed very good.
The Grim Reaper.
I don't know who made that up, but black cats are one of the most nicest, like, caring, cuddling cats I've ever had. So.
That is so deep, Naria. That is the deepest. There she goes.
Oh, she didn't like that. Yeah. So make a comment on what you shared. Yeah, I feel like I've thought of it in a different way instead of thinking like, oh, my death is nearing, so I need to like make more caring and like meaningful decisions on what I do in my daily life. But it's kind of more like with my son and with my husband and family, it's kind of like, what if I never see them again, like the next day or something? So like sometimes my son gets very frustrating and I'm like, no, you have to be in timeout. Like you said, it's like you have to stay, I'm gonna stay here. I need to work on something. And I realized that like he doesn't understand, he's too young, that I need to work, and he just wants to spend time with me. And then I think like, what if like that's his last experience with me where I'm telling him, no, you can't do that, and like, and I ignore him and he wouldn't feel any love. So I also often feel guilty in that way. So I always try to think like, okay, if he's asking for my attention, I want to be able to give that to him. So I actually try to make the time, like I will get my work done while he's asleep, and then try to if he's awake and he wants to do something, we go to the park, we play outside in the backyard or in the living room. And yeah, I think like, what if I don't get to see him tomorrow? What if he never gets to see me? And what was his last experience with me? So that's what came to mind when you were sharing that.
Wow, when you share that, some stuff comes to my mind too. Oh my gosh. Like yesterday, I was minute to minute busy. Like I didn't have a single minute where I didn't have something to do, a meeting or some deadline. And my son just comes in, he's 4 years old, okay? And he's like, Pop, I want to play with you. And he just sits on my lap and just looks me in the eye. And he's like, just like 10 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, you know? And I'm like, I didn't have any time. I was already late to the next thing, but I just try to have a moment with him. Just like, so we just look each other in the eye for like a good 10 seconds and just like kind of a showdown, but also just a moment of truly understanding each other's hearts. That, you know, because I realize it's not just about quantity time. It really is quality time to create those moments of like really understanding each other's hearts. And then actually he somehow he was okay after that. And he's like, okay, I want a snack. Okay, go get a snack. And that was it. You know, he was happy after that. But I don't know, I didn't spend more than a couple of minutes with him, but there was that moment. So I always try to remind people, don't feel guilty about the quantity time, but do be mindful of the quality time you spend with your friends and family. Yeah. Ricky?
Yeah, I can't really relate to the having kids part. Hopefully one day. But yeah, in terms of like, thinking about death and motivation, I don't know if I can think about it in that way, in the way you explained it. But I do think about, death in the sense of like, I want to leave some kind of like legacy, right? I want to leave something behind that's, impactful and important in a sense. And so in that way, like, yeah, I'm always, searching and, being present and trying to find, what it is that I have that can be of some value to the world. That's also something my dad always instilled in me, So I try to find something that you can contribute to the world, not just like what makes you happy.
You got it. Being present, and connecting with those that matter.
Mm.
Okay, thanks, Ricky, Naria. We're going to close out here. One announcement, right? That is what's happening this Saturday, everybody.
The Climate Action Synergy.
Climate Action Synergy. You're not going to want to miss it. 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yep.
We've got, oh, God, look. Ooh.
Yeah. So for those who might have not seen the update, so because of the number of submissions, we actually ended up combining the high school and the undergraduate groups. So it's all going to be just one group at 6 p.m. This coming Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. So, and we also have our guest judges confirmed. So we have, Ricky, if you want to go to the next slide. So Mr. Insup Park, he's the chairman of the Pacific Rim Integrated Development Group. Who takes care of like assets and businesses in Kona, Hawaii, but he's also an advisor to the Women's Federation for World Peace International. And they're working on projects that actually address the climate action, climate change. And the next person who's also a guest judge is Mrs. Susan Golden. She's the co-chair and a mentor for the Climate Reality Project for the New Jersey Gateway chapter. And she's an educator who has made it her personal mission to really teach the community about the problems in the environment, also with climate. And our next judge is Dr. Denshaw Dadachanji. He's a research director for the Hyojung International Foundation for the Unity of Sciences. So where they try to bring together the scientific aspect along with like a religious and faith aspect, and how to really bring that together to address the environmental issues and finding solutions that they think is in an internal and spiritual aspect, as well as the practical and scientific aspect. So kind of uniting and bringing those together. So these are our three guest judges. So it's really, I'm looking forward to being able to hear their feedback and input. But we also have our three presenters chosen. So we have three presenters who will be giving their presentations this Saturday. So look forward to seeing who those are and what kind of presentations they have as well.
Spoiler alert, Iris is one of the presenters. So you don't want to miss that. All right, awesome slides. I want to get those. Very awesome. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us today on Rise Up. We will see you next week. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oh.
Bye.